Hello, hello. I'm
Hi.
live. I'll do my usual and check on YouTube itself that we are actually streaming. Yes, indeed. Hello, folks. We have people sitting in the waiting room already. Where are we?
Yes.
Kentucky, Tucson, South Africa, UK. Fantastic.
Mick on the other side of Tennessee. Hopefully it's as pretty there as it is here. Tampa.
Well, as you might expect, I'm in Great Britain, so it's raining.
Oh no.
Howdy from Texas, Georgia. Fantastic. We'll give people just a minute or two to pop in before we completely get started.
So good to see so many people.
Hello, Larry.
Hey, Larry. And hey, Jane.
Jane, yeah, very wet UK today, yes. Very wet and very dry of petrol. If any of our American friends haven't seen the news with people panic buying fuel, leaving just about every petrol station in the country bereft of petrol. So that's great.
Oh, hey, Peter. Yeah, it's cold. I imagine with all that rain.
Cloudy Columbus. All right, cool. At least we got somewhere else that's cloudy. So we'll get started here. Everybody, I hope you are ready today, as you can see in the title of today's stream, to get self-publishing savvy with
Yay.
Katherine. I'm sure a number of you probably know Katherine already from being a member of the AutoCrit team now and getting involved a lot within the community. So she's inside our member exclusive community, which is, AutoCrit Pro members only. And she's also out and about in our public Facebook group, doing a lot of discussion over there. And this session really came about from discussion over there when Katherine was celebrating the very successful release of her novel, The Vow That Twisted Fate. And you can see her background there. Quite a graphic representation of it. Now, we wanted to really just bring her in today as well to do a bit of a Q&A. So if anybody out there watching, if you guys have questions that you'd like to ask, pop them into the chat there. I'll make sure I grab them, and we'll get Katherine to answer them. But for the kind of, to kick us off, I suppose, today, I wanted Katherine to sort of walk us through, as a group, sort of what she did, all the things to look out for and potential pitfalls there, because now the book itself, The Vow That Twisted Fate, was a confirmed Amazon bestseller in multiple categories, including new adult fantasy and occult fiction. So I'll ask you a little bit about, especially the new adult fantasy side of things, Katherine, as well. But I want to start with a question for you that's one of the most annoying, I think, that any author gets asked. And it's kind of, where did your inspiration come from? Where did the story idea come from? Although for a lot of my stories, I can almost pinpoint that spark, what it was that came into that idea. But what was this for you?
Well, this one was actually a NaNoWriMo induced dream I had. I was probably 2 or 3 days into NaNoWriMo in 2016, and I was feverishly working on a book that I didn't really care for, and fell asleep mid-writing, and I had a very vivid dream of the key scene in the middle of The Vow That Twisted Fate, her refusal of the call scene, when she's stuck in a dimension that is all evil, as opposed to her parallel world where evil was banished 500 years before and it was all purely good. And so she's trying to figure out how to get out of this evil dimension. And then it makes her question, what is evil? Who gets to decide? And when I woke up, I was like, I have to write this book. So I scrapped the first book and wrote this book for the rest of NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, for those who are watching and don't know. And it's coming up in November. But yeah, so mostly it was because of the dream, and then I just had to know what happened, so I decided to write it.
So it's kind of a vivid conjuring of this situation that really brought it to life. And how far into Nano was it that you thought, right, well, I'm going to scrap this other one?
It's about 3 days. So about,
that's good.
About 5,000 words into the other book, but the other book was just feeling really forced. It didn't feel like it was flowing, and I'm a pantser through and through. And for those who are new to that term, planners are outliners, and you plan everything in advance, and plansters, they've outlined a little and then they fly by their seat of the pants for the fill in. And then pantsers are like me. We sit down and we're like, okay, here's a sentence one, and I'm just going to flow until it's done, and then I'll go back and fix it.
I can see Kelly say it was a pantser year.
Yes, it was a pantser year. Every year's a pantser year for me.
And yeah, some comments there. Love NaNoWriMo and whatnot. Of course, if any of you there don't know, we are in fact an official sponsor of NaNoWriMo this year as well. So make sure to pop on over to the NaNoWriMo site, and you can see us in the sponsor listing. There's some free goodies for you to grab there to help you with Preptober, which we are just about to come into. So we'll get into that all the Nano stuff as the months go on, but it's already there and available for you if you want to check out the NaNoWriMo site. Of course, taking part in NaNoWriMo, if you haven't done it before, I guess, Katherine, you would be 100% a proponent of NaNoWriMo.
Yes, every book that I've ever successfully written, I've written during NaNoWriMo. I'm 100% a big fan. I think even I've seen people say that they're slower and they can't hit 50,000 words in 1 month, which is the goal of NaNoWriMo. Ultimately, the overall goal is just to give you a reason to write and plug you in with a community of other writers. And that's what helped me sort of believe that I could start the writing process. And so, yeah.
Yeah, motivation.
Yeah.
I think otherwise, sometimes, yeah, if you don't have that kind of framework to jump into and really, get involved with, it's easy to sit around and go, well, life's just too busy. I don't have the time.
And SM, yes, that is also where I learned about AutoCrit a few years ago, was through NaNoWriMo, through sponsors. And so, yeah, I plugged in, and, I've only worked for AutoCrit since March of this year. And Val was already completely edited and up for pre-order by that point. So I had been using AutoCrit as a user, and it's just been a game changer for my publishing.
Excellent. I see top of the line community worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And well, it's quite interesting when you reveal there that you pantsed your way through the whole thing, just kind of off the back of this situation that you envisaged, because having placed so well in the new adult fantasy realm, especially being a bestseller in that market, I was going to ask, when you sat down to write this, did you actually have a target audience, like a real goal of who you were trying to serve with this in mind from the beginning, or was it more about just writing what you wanted to read?
That's a great question. So I actually just wrote it because I wanted to get it out and I couldn't quit thinking about it. And at first, I really only meant to show it to my sister. I was not very confident in publishing it until last summer, and my husband, who hates fiction books, he's just not a reader, picked it up while I was in the hospital having my son, and he wanted something to read, and he read it, and he's like, "This is great." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if it's great." So when I decided to publish, I actually had to find a target audience for it because I never wrote it meaning for somebody to actually read it. I was pretty sure my goal in life was just to be sort of an editor on the side. It's totally different having somebody else read your books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it was really hard. If you're watching and you're a planner or a pantser, having an idea of your target audience in mind is a number one tip that I would throw your way before you start writing, because if you try to find where does it fit after it's written, it is so much harder.
That way lies madness.
Yes.
And I guess that takes us across, because we want to head down in this session the road of the many trials of self-publishing, and the process that you take to come out with something that again has a fantastic outcome. It's like the ending that everybody's looking for when the book comes out, and really great responses. I've seen reviews. I have a copy of the book. I will say I have not read it, but I'll get to it. It's in my to read pile. But walk us through that kind of process. One early thing. So you've sat and you finished it. It's done. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, for all intents and purposes, and then your husband says, well, if this is actually really good, maybe you should publish this. So that kind of seed gets planted in your mind. Where next?
Well, developmental editing. Developmental editing was next. As a developmental editor, I feel like you cannot developmentally edit your own books well. And AutoCrit has so many great reports and stuff for the technical editing side, but at that time we didn't have author services. So I had to go search out a developmental editor that I could trust to give me objective feedback, because feedback from friends and feedback from, your family is only as worth as much as their willingness to be honest, um, one way or the other. So I got it developmentally edited, which is really important being a pantser, and it had holes everywhere. So I say the developmental editor killed my soul a little bit, but it was good. It made the book really what it is. The entire ending has been reworked, and things have been fleshed out, and characters now have their own voices, and um, the beats fall in the right place, and they help me map it out to the hero's journey, which is my favorite um, structure, plot structure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so developmental editing, and then tons of revising, and then beta reading from professional beta readers, and then more revising, and then beta reading from just regular readers, and then more revising. All that took about 6 to 8 months.
And I would say as well, kind of calling back to what you said about the initial having an idea of your audience to begin with, that also ties into, I would say, the sage advice that feedback from your family and friends is probably not the most useful. And most people tend to think of that because they're like, okay, well, they're just going to massage my ego and say, yeah, it's amazing. I didn't know you could write like this. But it can be quite the opposite as well, where they're simply not your target at all. That's why I simply can't use my wife for any of my stuff, because she'll just read it and go, I don't get it, because she doesn't work within that genre. She doesn't understand any of it. She wants to read completely different stuff. So it's just, okay, you find the people that are actually useful, especially publishing professionals with the objective eye.
Yes.
And speaking of that objective eye, so how long did it take, the developmental edit, going back and forth, and how much of a trial was that? Did you get into any, I guess, digital fisticuffs over keeping some things or changing others?
I definitely had my darlings. So it took her 4 weeks. I found her through Fiverr and recommendations from friends. And I sent her a 1 chapter trial to make sure that, we were a good match. And then about 4 weeks later, she sent me the complete critique and thousands of comments. And I worked through them. And a lot of them, she was spot on. Some of them I knew she was right, but I just didn't know how to fix it for a while. So I ended up probably sitting in that first revision for 2 to 3 months, just trying to work out like the ending. The ending needed to be totally redone. And now I'm so proud of my ending, where before my ending was sort of meh. But really, my world building, since this is an epic fantasy, the world building is key. My world building had way too many darlings in it, and so a lot of it had to go. And there are maybe still a couple scenes that I could have cut, but I was just like, I just don't have the heart to cut them. And apparently, I guess it didn't matter all that much that I left them in there. But now when I go back and I reread it, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I guess. But I'm definitely glad that I cut out the scenes that I did.
And speaking of the story, there's one thing I think, since you mentioned it there, that we might have skipped over to, is tell us about the actual story and filling that in. Because if you start with this kind of concept of a character, you don't really know who she is in your mind when you envisioned that scene and thought, well, I just got to write this. Especially if you're pantsing it, how did that all come together for you? And give everybody here, I guess, just an overview of the plot, kind of what you're working with in that fantasy space.
Sure. So, The Vow That Twisted Fate, which is this book, has a main character and a villain that are both strong female protagonists, but the main character does not start off as a strong female protagonist, which is a little unusual for me. If people have read my writing, they know I like kick a like female main characters, but it's about a queen who's been raised her whole life in a world without evil, and there's a parallel dimension where all the evil things were banished by her ancestor. And a huge part of the plot in the story is deciding whether or not she is a reincarnation of her ancestor. I would say it's much more complicated than that. without giving too many spoilers. But ultimately, the sorceress in the parallel evil dimension, her time has moved slower than in Queen Arlena's good dimension. So it's only been 5 years for the evil sorceress, and she has found a way to break through back into the other world. And her goal is to reconquer the entire world, finish the war that was started, and take vengeance on everybody that cast her and all the creatures they consider to be evil out. So Arlena has to call forward in time a group of dwarven warriors who faced off against this sorceress in order to help her defeat the sorceress and close the portal before her world is overtaken and destroyed.
Exciting.
Yeah. So for her, I wrote it from first person present tense, which is not as common as, third person past tense from a narrator. But I really wanted to show and put the readers inside the shoes of the character where they could imagine living through her eyes as they went through the story, especially because it originated with the dream when I was living it as if I was this character. And it was just a very rich experience.
Yeah, I guess just felt natural to fall in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So going on from the story, so you've done developmental, and I guess a lot of work, as you say, in something like an epic fantasy with lots of moving parts. There's going to be a lot of changing. What happens when you're now happy with your structure?
So once I got finished and I sent it to all the different beta readers and got that back, and nobody had any more gaping holes and gaping questions, at that point, it was time to self-edit. And that is where AutoCrit really came into play for me. I got the monthly pro membership. And as soon as I got the opportunity for lifetime, I upped to lifetime because I liked that I could compare my book against other fantasy books and not just have, okay, here's the grammatical errors and typos. Being able to say, your book is 102,000 words long and it has this many adverbs and it should only have this many compared to other fantasy books. Or it should have, this many long paragraphs compared to other fantasy books was super, super helpful with my pacing. And I had sent my book to a line editor, which is the first level of technical editing where they help you sort of fix your paragraphs and your sentences and make it read smoother for your readers before it goes to copy editors for typos and making sure your fantasy names are all spelled the same way through the whole book and all of that. And the line editor originally was like, this is going to be $1,600. And I was just like, oh, I'm working 2 jobs just trying to pay my bills. So I used AutoCrit, plugged it in, and it caught over 3,000 errors and had a lot more recommendations that weren't errors. If you've never used the software, sometimes there's recommendations in there that you accept or decline or tweak. So that's what I did, was go through all of it. And by the time I was done, the line editor didn't even need to look at it anymore. I was able to skip straight to my copy editor, Terry. And so it saved me $1,600 by going through and doing the line edit myself. And then, of course, Terry took it and did copy editing, and she only found a couple hundred errors. And then by the time she was done and it went to my proofreader, she only found 13 errors.
Oh,
so I
excellent.
was really excited.
I'd be proud of that.
Yeah.
So we've had, what have we had? Developmental, a lot of beta reading, additional developmental. Then we're doing, was it line editing in AutoCrit? So to do that first. Line editing human if you still need it. You've had your copy editor and your proofreader.
Yeah.
Now I know Burton has asked in the comments there, did you load the entire book into AutoCrit or did you do it in sections?
I loaded the entire book. I used Chrome, which I highly recommend doing if you're going to load the entire book. And do it from somewhere where you have fast internet. This isn't something you should do on McDonald's Wi-Fi. But I loaded the entire book and would go through the entire book that way. In subsequent books since Vow, I have done chapter by chapter and paused my writing to sort of have the reader read back to me what I've written, because I catch a lot of my holes that way. So I'm hoping it won't need as many developmental edits on my next book. But we'll see when it comes out.
Well, that's right. I mean, I guess the experience of the ones before as well, it carries through, especially structurally and developmentally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now we have been proofread, and I'm guessing is there any more steps here for the end for you deciding, okay, this is ready to go into the machine? Let's say.
Well, when I got the formatting done, a little bit of publishing experience I've had carried over into the self-publishing side, which is knowing that I would need a galley proofer. And that's the step that a lot of authors really miss. A galley is what you call a book once it's completely formatted before it goes off to print. The version that is being printed is called a galley. And so once I got it formatted, I sent it to a galley proofer. And the galley proofer's main job is making sure that, the indents are in the right place and none of the sentences got cut off halfway through, or the example we've used on our lives where an entire beginning sentence got cut off. Like, that's a galley proofer's job to catch that stuff. So I sent it to a galley proofer, and she did catch one or two errors that had slipped through all the other editors that I'd had. And so I was able to fix that before sending it to print. But at that point, really, all that was left was the abundance of research about marketing and building an audience and uploading it for distribution.
And how long, since we're kind of getting to this point now where you're looking into the marketing side of things, timeline-wise, how long are we talking since, you'd finished in, let's say, you'd written it during November for NaNoWriMo. Whereabouts are we now that you've kind of gotten to this point that it's all proofed and you're kind of ready to go?
Well, I wrote it in November 2016 and then picked it up again after my son was born last summer. So like June last summer, and it wasn't ready to go to distribution until March of this year. It just needed so much developmental edit work and everything. So I actually overlapped. I started my marketing back in November last year, building up my platform and starting a website and starting a newsletter and starting social media. That's stuff you don't want to wait to start doing until your book's ready to print. Like, you need to start. I wish I had started far more than 7 months in advance, to be perfectly honest. I don't feel like it was nearly enough time.
And I guess that's part of the thing as well, is to say not to overlook the galley proof and whatnot, because there's nothing worse than getting that first physical proof in the post, and you want to be so proud of this book when you open it and look through, and all of, like, first few pages there's lines cut off. Oh, look, there's a typo. It's just the worst thing in the world to have to go back for more proofs. Yeah. But yeah, since we're kind of at that point, let's move into marketing. So you say even while you were still finalizing all of those things, you were working on the marketing strategy. What did you do kind of sequentially there?
So the number one thing that I did, and I cannot recommend enough, was getting a mentor. I personally worked with a lady named Lindsay, and AutoCrit has story coaches as well. But I really got a mentor to help me through the final versions of my writing process, and then also give me step-by-steps on how to build a brand, which is like colors and logos and the feelings you want readers to have when they come to your website or when they pick up your books. What do you want them to think of when they think of you? So establishing your brand. She worked me through every aspect, and it was fantastic. I really didn't feel confident that I could do this before I started working with her. And I was sort of floundering around looking at all these other options for learning how to self-publish, really, because there's a million different websites and stuff that'll tell you how to do it. So it took me from June to November of last year to find a mentor that I trusted. And I found one through the Alliance of Independent Authors, ALLI, which is a free resource for indie authors. And so she gave me my step-by-steps, but it all started out with, ultimately, you need a hook of some kind to give your readers. In my case, I dusted off an old novella that I wrote for Gaia Online. This is how old I am. When I was in high school. And I was like, oh, well, this is a fantasy, and it's sort of a dark fantasy. And I write some dark fantasy and then some epic fantasy and some that overlap. And I was like, I'll give this out for free to anybody who signs up for my email list. And so I had a hook to go ahead and get my readers subscribing to my email. And then I had to come up with content for the email. I had to actually go sign up for an Instagram, and go sign up for Twitter and go sign up for my Facebook page. I didn't have any of that. And I was really reluctant, honestly, to do social media, but the organic marketing and building relationships with other authors and readers on especially Instagram has been the number one thing that has helped me make it where I am today, because I know I wouldn't be here without them.
Were all of those set up to be cohesive with your author brand?
Yes. Yep. So I've got my logo image on my Twitter and my Facebook and my Instagram. I've got colors on a color chart that I keep, where it's like, here are the colors that I'll use on my graphics. Here are the colors that I'll use on my ads. I've got fonts picked out that I use. And these are all the little nitty gritty things that you never think about. You're like, oh, writing is just writing. And then they're selling.
Yep. Marketing is a minefield.
And I had to find my target readers, which I said earlier I didn't have. And so I had to identify who my target readers were and also identify what we have in common, because we read more from authors we know, especially if it's an indie author. So I had to find little things like, a lot of my ideal readers have pets. A lot of my ideal readers love to travel. A lot of my ideal readers are foodies like I am. And so I don't always post about my books. I post about other people's books. I post about a recipe that I had, or throwback pictures to places I went before the pestilence started, and my cats. And it helps me connect with people, because that's all about writing, is showing a little bit of your soul to people, and marketing's the same way.
Yeah, that was something I was going to say as well. I was going to say, well, I assume you can't just sort of set up your Instagram, set up your Twitter, and then just sit there and wait for something. Wait for people to come along and say, hey, what is it you do?
Right. Yeah. And then really the part that I was the most nervous about, that has helped my marketing the most, is lifting up other authors in your genre. Indie authors and self-published authors are a little different than traditional. I've seen people say, oh, you're your competition. And while that's true in a way, an indie author doesn't have the means to put out as much as a full-time paid traditional author usually. And if somebody reads a Stephen King book they don't like, they're going to say, oh, I don't like this Stephen King book. And either they don't like it enough that they just read a different one of his books, or they never read him again. But if somebody reads an indie published book, they say, I'm never going to read an indie book ever again. And all the indie authors are off the table. So we either all succeed together, or ultimately we all sort of fail together. So it's in our best interest to really, try to lift each other up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think it's, especially when you are in niches as well, there's so much of that as far as I'm concerned. It's like, what, being adversarial about it is not really the way to go. I think there's enough of the pie for everyone. And just be nice. Be a nice person. Yeah. It's not too difficult. Speaking of nice people, like see C.H. Smith in the comments said, good newsletter today, by the way.
Oh, thank you, C.H. Smith. Yes, today I sent in my newsletter the 4 books from June, July, and August that I gave 5-star reviews, because I'm also a Readsy reviewer on Readsy Discovery. I don't work for Readsy, but Readsy Discovery is like, here are these vetted reviewers, like editors like me, and we'll review books for free. And out of the, I want to say 15 or so I read in the last 3 months, 4 got 5-star reviews. So I shared them today.
And Steve had asked there, what type of stuff do you put in a newsletter for an up-and-coming book release? What kind of things did you do once you started building that mailing list?
Well, this will depend a lot on your genre and who your target reader is and what they engage with. For my readers, being new adult fantasy, quizzes about the characters, like which character would you be in this book, is one that was really popular. I give away character art of my characters. I give sneak peeks here and there. I let my readers be a huge part of my process. So I'm actually getting ready to release the audiobook for Val. And I had 2 covers and I didn't know which one to do. So I sent a newsletter out last week and I was like, hey guys, you pick the cover. Which one do you want? And it helps them be involved and get connected with you, and also helps you remember who you're really writing for. So yeah, I would just do a little bit of your ideal reader building research to see what kind of posts they interact with. Are they quiz people? Are they recipe people? I've sent out recipes. And then I tried to do a lot of author swaps before the book came out because I didn't have a lot to post about the book that wasn't out yet. So instead, I would say to a fellow author, hey, you have this great book. Can I feature you? Can I do an author interview with you? And I would do a live author interview with them on Instagram, which would connect me with their readers in the same genre. And in months when I don't have books coming out, I refer readers to the plethora of fantastic indie authors that I know.
Amazing. It's such a great attitude to have as well, to see an author having. So well done. And kind of related there, Anna was asking, how easy is it to audiobook? How's it been getting the audiobook together?
It was way easier than I originally thought. Once I figured out that there's an actual process for this, besides trying to find and pay a producer, aka narrator, thousands of dollars and license it just right so that you have broadcasting rights and all that stuff. It was so overwhelming that I actually didn't think I was ever going to do one. Oh, hey, Kimberly. But I ended up going through the ACX, which is what I should have done to begin with, which in the US is like the authority on all things audiobooks. They are the registry that maintains all the audiobooks. And they act as a marketplace between ACX approved narrators and authors. And so I put a query out there because on the ACX, you can say you're going to do a royalty share for as long as the audiobook's published. Which I didn't know you could do. So if you don't have the thousands of dollars to pay a good producer what they're worth, you can invest a little bit in a cash up front investment and then do a royalty split, which is what I'm doing. And I had producers come and they were auditioning and would read a sample from the book for me with accents and everything and sent it back. And I found Talon David, and her voice literally, this being a first person, it was so important that the voice be just right. Her voice just brought this world to life exactly as I imagined it in my head. And then I give all kudos to Talon from there, because at that point, she does everything, really. All the reading, all the editing. She's in the process of editing right now. I basically just had to provide a pronunciation guide and like all my fantasy words and fantasy names, and this race, like the centaurs speak with this accent and the dwarves speak with this accent and the elves speak with that accent. But yeah, it should be coming out sometime later this fall, hopefully. But yeah, if you get plugged in on the ACX, it was pretty straightforward. I just wish that I had started there.
Awesome. Now I'm going to pedal back a little here, try to get us back on the train as well of all the stuff we've been through, because we have been through a lot. I won't list everything so far, but there's all the writing side of things, the editing. Now we're into the marketing ahead of time. And I know, well, what we haven't talked about yet is when the book is completely finished, what about things like your cover artwork and all of any other collateral that you need for the launch?
Yeah, that's really, the writing is the most fun part of putting out a book. So the cover, my beautiful cover here, this is designed by Jesh Art Studio. And unfortunately, Jesh is out on medical leave as far as I know. But Jesh has made all of my covers ever up until he went out on leave. And I think that a good cover sells your book. We say don't judge a book by its cover, but we do, and our audience does. Getting a reputable cover designer who can show you a portfolio of work that you can see in the indie market has good reviews is a great place to start. And they're not cheap. You're not going to get the same kind of feedback with a $25 cover as you're going to get with, in my case, Vow cost me about $400 for the ebook and the paperback and the hardback with the dust jacket sleeves. But you're also buying commercial rights. So you have to commission your cover. You have to commission the art for the cover in cases like mine where it's custom artwork and not like stock photos. And then you have to get commercial use rights and not just royalty free, so that you have permission to like make money off of it long term and not credit all the artists every single time you use it. So a lot goes into it, but the cover is, to me, besides my editing, the number one investment that I put into a book. And then there's character art. Like I said, I commission character art so that I can give that out to my readers as a bonus and turn those into stickers and things. But there's a lot of small technical pieces that I actually kept a spreadsheet for. Things like buying my own ISBN number, because VOW is wide, which means it's not on just Amazon. It's on Amazon, it's on Google Play, it's on Barnes & Noble, and it's going up on Ingram for libraries and bookstores to purchase through Ingram. So I was able to buy my own ISBN numbers instead of using a free one to do that.
Yeah.
And then there's copyrights and registering it with the Library of Congress if you're in the US. And I think the UK has something similar. I don't know, Gareth, where you have to register it with a government library.
You can, yeah, if you want it stocked.
So yeah, there's a lot of little pieces like that, and finding a formatter to do your formatting interior is so important, so that you have, you know, all the pretty scene dividers and it laid out where you don't have to worry about it yourself. I think when all was said and done, I see the comment about budget. I'm in the US and I used a lot of connections on Fiverr, and these are publishing house professionals that take side gigs on Fiverr. Between that and AutoCrit and everything, it ended up costing me about $2,800 to self-publish VOW, which I don't keep a secret. So you can check out my YouTube channel if you'd like details more on the price side and where I went and all of that. But yeah, once the marketing gets going, you've got all those little pieces that you're trying to put together to assemble the physical product before you distribute it.
And I know you had as well some extra clutter, like little video trailers and things like that created for it.
Yeah, the video trailer was at the very, very end, and it was my biggest nightmare. And I still have not found a perfect video trailer designer. So if you know one, let me know. There's a lot of complex details that go into video trailers. Again, you have to have commercial use video clips, not just royalty free. And that eliminates almost all the video trailer people on Fiverr. Because their fine print would all be like, these are royalty free, so you can use it for anything except making money. And I was like, well, that doesn't help me. So it's a lot. I actually ended up using a lot of my own commercial footage and my own commercial images that I already had licensed for a book trailer. And then I got all the swag for my street team, which I think will come up in a minute. But the group of people, amazing people who read my book before it came out and supported it and recommended it to all their friends and shared it all over their social media, that's called my street team. So I got them like t-shirts and stickers and notebooks and handmade necklaces and stuff to say, hey, I appreciate what you're doing.
Amazing. One thing that goes catches up with where we are already. Kimberly asking, did you establish a budget beforehand or just go with the flow kind of along the way?
Well, as I said earlier, I was working 2 jobs, so I did budget a little bit. I budgeted about $500 a month, which was a paycheck for me every month at that time, and just socked it back while I was doing my revising so that I could end up paying the differences. So in October, a good chunk went to my copy editing, proofreading, and then another big chunk went to my cover designer. Pro tip, don't be like me. Don't get your cover design until the book is completely finished and formatted, because then I had to go back and pay for adjustments to things like the spine, because the cover was made for one page count. And when I was all done with my words, it was a much different page count. And you think, oh, it's no big deal until you go to upload it in Barnes and Noble, or you go to upload it on Amazon, and they're like, nope, this doesn't match our template anymore. So I ended up actually going back and spending $50 I didn't need to spend to correct the cover I was too impatient to wait to get. So yeah, I would recommend budgeting in advance if you have the ability to do it. It's a big investment. And the second book has not been as expensive because now I know my people. I have contracts with a lot of these people that know, hey, Catherine's got 2 books coming out next year, and then 3 books coming out the year after that, and then 3 books coming out the year after that. So I have a set rate that I work with and no more trial and error. And you only have to establish your branding once. You only have to get your author website built once. You only have to get an author logo once. So it's like,
That's true.
All these little things that it's like, okay, this is expensive, but it should only be expensive the first time.
Or at least hopefully you're only doing it once.
Yeah. Unless you're like, hey, I want to start writing horror now. I need a totally different pen name.
And Kristen was wondering, how did you build your street team? I think you mentioned it was mostly kind of friends, family.
Actually, when I put out my novella, the free one, I sent it to a lot of friends and family and was very disappointed to see that literally only 2 people read it. I don't think to this day that anybody in my family except one sister and my husband has actually read Vow, which is interesting. Some authors have supportive family and some don't. And so really, I found most of my street team through Instagram. I started posting content. I see Anna asked about that 7 months in advance. So around November last year, I started posting content about recipes, writer fuel recipes, little things I was learning about editing. I didn't really have any snippets ready to go out. So I mostly just supported other authors' books. And then the novella that I was putting out for a free newsletter hook in the beginning. And the people that really engaged in those posts and commented on them, I privately messaged some of them and I was like, hey, I really appreciate your support because I'm a brand new author. And would you be interested in getting a free copy of my book in advance? And in exchange, being willing to talk about it to your friends if you like it. Because it's against Amazon's terms of service to require a review in exchange for a free book. So I didn't do that, but it's not like a review swap. I mostly was like, here's a book. If you like it and you'd like to read or leave a review, great. If not, that's okay. But I'm mostly looking for people who really love it and would like to talk about it. And I was blown away that by the time Val launched, I had a strong street team of about 12 amazing people who was ready just to talk it up.
Just to sing your praises. And did you cement reviews ahead of time elsewhere in any way, or how did that go? Trying to find that coverage.
I didn't have it done in time to send out to like the Washington Post. There's some free trade review sites that are great if you're trying to get into bookstores or libraries, like USA Today, New York Times, Washington Post, Clarion/Forward Reviews. But most of them require indie books for free consideration at least 6 months in advance. And the book wasn't ready till March and it came out in July. So I missed a big window of opportunity for consideration there. But I did put it in to the Next Generation Indie Book Awards, which it placed in the 5 fantasy finalists. And that I still am in shock that it actually placed, being my very first book. But that did wonders for publicity. I did that at the recommendation of a writer friend, C.K. Sorens. And I sent it for an indie reader review, which helped as well because they are known for being blatantly honest with their reviews. And so it got a 5-star indie reader review too. And I did that as soon as I had the finished version back in March. And then it took 4 to 6 weeks for them to send that back to me.
And then I
So,
guess you have to turn all of those into further marketing collateral.
right. And then I went and researched bloggers, connecting with other indie authors on Instagram connected me with the bloggers that reviewed their books. And so I was able to say, hey, I've been following your reviews for a few months, and I see you've also reviewed this person and this person and this person who write similar books to me. I have a book coming out July. Would you be interested in a free copy for your blog? And I got about 8 bloggers who actually have website blogs, because SEO, search engine optimization, you want your name and your book's title out there on other people's websites too. And those were free, so they were legitimate. I did not pay a penny for promoting my book. None of my reviewers and none of my bloggers are paid. And then Nerdy Book Box, which is a book monthly subscription company like Loot Crate or Illumina Crate or Owl Crate. Nerdy Book Box does free promotion and book tours for qualifying authors. And so they did a launch tour for me as well. But I spent a lot of time on Google and talking to friends about, are these people reputable? Have you worked with them? Finding ones that were legit versus ones that were like, yeah, I'll review it. Now send me $30 or send me $50. And it's like, no, I'm not paying you for a, for a review. So yeah.
It's just like, yeah, it's like, well, A, I'm not paying you, and B, it's just not ethical, really, is it? The it was interesting about the Nerdy Book Box. How did that come about? Did you contact them? Did they contact you? How did they kind of vet everything?
So one of my street team members, Nadi, she knew about them and recommended my book to them and recommended me to them. And I messaged with her and filled out a form basically of what my plot was and any trigger warnings that were in the book and diversity and things like that for them. And they were able to determine whether it was a good fit for their audience. And while we decided not to move forward with an actual box for it at the time, they did do the promotion. And I'm so thankful, because that was really a career changer in my opinion.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm thinking a lot of what you're saying there in terms of those connections and everything really speaks to, well, I guess it's the power of networking. Is actually, again, being a nice person, being able to connect with people.
Yeah, I mean, I say I was so reluctant to get on Instagram because I was just like, I don't want to be fake. I'm not the kind of person that's like, oh, I want to look happy all the time and things are great all the time. And when I plugged in, I found that at least on the fantasy author aspect, people were just real people sharing real wins and real struggles. And I was able to plug in there. And then ultimately, I just wanted to pay it forward. What I was learning from them, I wanted to pass on to other people. And then it's just sort of ballooned out from there. You know, we're all on the same team again, so we have to support each other.
And I'm seeing here there's a question from Burton. It's probably quite an easy one. Is the uploading to the different platforms for ebooks, when you were talking about upload, different formats, where are your books being printed? I'm assuming most of the platforms are just going to have ebook option and then print on demand.
Yeah. So if you're not going through Ingram, Ingram Spark is like the biggest, baddest producer. Even small presses and indie presses use Ingram Spark for ebook and hardback and paperback. When you just upload it in one place and you pay the fee, and they handle putting it on all the websites live, but then you of course still have to market to people and you still have to take it to the bookstore and tell them they're there. I decided to do things sort of backwards because Ingram's expensive, and I wasn't sure if Val was going to do good enough to warrant trying to put it in a bookstore. So I uploaded a paperback and an ebook in Amazon KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. The ebook I was able to set up for pre-order. The paperbacks I was not. So the paperbacks didn't get to go live until right there. Yeah, Ingram Spark. And then Barnes & Noble Press I used for a Nook ebook and a hardback with a dust jacket, but the hardbacks are very expensive. I've got it about as low as it will let me list it at $24.99 for a 300 320 page novel. I've had some struggles getting Barnes & Noble Press to work quite the way I wanted, but the hardback book itself is pretty. But now I've been accepted into Amazon's beta for hardbacks on Amazon KDP. And so I'm going to list a special edition, collector's edition hardback with a special cover and all my deleted darlings the hardback on Amazon for the super fans. But going forward with future books, I plan on just putting them on Ingram because I've spent so much time, even though uploading on Amazon directly and uploading on Barnes & Noble directly and Google Play directly, which is my third, was free. It was so much time, and every single one has a different cover template. So I had to have my cover had to be different for every single version. Even the ebook covers were not the same for Google Play and Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I had to have 3 different ebook covers, 2 different paperback covers, 1 different hardback cover. And I found myself at the end wishing I had just gone to Ingram from the get-go.
Just get it done in one go. I was going to ask as well there, the likes of the Amazon listings, I was going to say, did you do it all yourself? Because even when you're filling in all of the information on Amazon, you still got to have a really good description and that catches the eye and all the info that you got to fill in there. And there's something of an SEO perspective too in terms of searches and what's going on that site. But did you do all of that yourself, or did you have some assistance with filling all that in?
I did all of it myself with the exception of probably the most important thing, which was my blurb. I'm very fortunate to be married 10 years now to a web content marketing manager. And he wrote the blurb that you see on everything related to my book because my original blurb sucked. So bad. When you're the one working with your book, it is so hard to step back and say, here's what they actually need to know. So yeah, the book itself and all the beautifulness of the blurb is all my husband. I'm very grateful. But everything else I had to research myself, or my mentor helped me research keywords, which categories to list it in. New adult being an official category of Amazon's now has been great. That's for 18 to 23-year-olds. My book is definitely not young adult. It has some content like some torture and darker moments in it that is not appropriate for like a 12-year-old young adult reader, young adult being 12 to 18. Older end, fine, but not the younger end. So it really does fit in the new adult category better. So for that, my mentor was able to say, hey, have you thought about new adult? Here's the keywords that are trending. And I was able to plug those in from there.
Awesome. And I think that, well, kind of when we get there, it's almost the end of the publishing journey, because then it's out in the wild and all the marketing is turning along, and you hope people find it. How was it when the first one sold?
I was very excited. On launch day, I had 30 people that had placed pre-orders. And I think the most recent stats I read from Kindle said that the life of a self-published book is like 100 copies. And I really wanted to at least get some kind of foothold beyond just that 100 copies. So when it hit home was 2 weeks later. I was at Walmart buying some stuff way too late at night. And my husband called me and he's like, have you looked at your book on Amazon? Your book is like number 120 in 3 different categories. And I'm going, wait, what? So then I went on Instagram and I went on Facebook and I'm telling people my book is so close to making it to Amazon bestseller. It needs to break through the top 100. And they just started sharing like crazy. And I dropped the price to 99 cents. And literally by the end of the next day, it was in the top 100 in all 3 of the subcategories. And I was just totally blown away. So the first 2 weeks were insane, far more than I thought they were going to be. I'm very thankful. It's been slower, but steadier, like a copy or 2 a day most days since then. And it launched July 9th. So now I just try to do building marketing from there. I like Bargain Booksy, for example. They've netted me the most bang for my buck as far as newsletter placements, but ultimately it's networking. More networking. Who can I swap author interviews with? Who can I do newsletter swaps where, hey, I feature your book and you feature my book and all of that?
Superb. Elaine was asking, did you do readings, book signings, anything like that?
I did a launch party live, 2 different virtual launch parties and a cover reveal live, but I didn't have any opportunity to do anything in person because I'm in a city where the pestilence has us locked down to not even eat in restaurants. Maybe one day. I had planned on going to a fantasy convention not far from here, and of course ended up not being able to go.
Oh dear. Well, that sucks. I can see everybody in the comments here are saying, brilliant, honest share, Catherine. Thank you. That's awesome. Congrats. I think we're kind of at the end of the journey there, and with everything going on. So there's been a lot.
Yes,
there's obviously a lot that goes into it. And I hope that certainly hearing you talk about it has been helpful to everybody watching. And do you have any final tips or anything you think we haven't mentioned that you go, oh, wait a minute?
Probably, I think my number one thing is to be kind to yourself, because I think when you get wrapped up in the marketing, you forget that most of us write because it's a passion. And if you make money off of it, great. I mean, there's people that write to make money. That's all well and good. But most of us write and would also like to make money as a side thing. This can become a business real quick and you lose the joy of your writing if you don't remember this is an art. Your first book's not going to be perfect. Val was good, but Starfire Express, which is my next one coming out, is so much better than Val, which I wrote in 2016, and it's only been 5 years. So you have to say, I'm going to take the negative criticism and any bad feedback you get, like 1 and 2 star reviews, look for the points that are legitimate, detach personally from them, take that into your next book writing experience, and just keep learning and growing, because every book you're going to put out is going to be easier. If you would be forgiving of an indie author for doing something, you should be willing to forgive yourself.
I couldn't say anything more true. Always make sure the joy remains as well. Thank you so much, Catherine. I can see everybody in the comments here. Yep, thank you. Larry says, Pestilence, you sound like an author. There's a spoiler there as well. My online gaming name is Pestilence. I've been chuckling every time you said it. It's great advice. Thank you, Catherine. Great. Yep. So I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much to everybody for coming. Catherine, again, it's, as always, inspirational and exceedingly honest. So again, thank you. And we'll see you around, everybody.
My pleasure. Thank you all so much for joining.